We're just working on getting our international folks in here. Anyone on the international panel, please take a seat here. Anyone on the international panel, please come on in. Now, I know we have overflow. I suppose at some point the Mott House has this beautiful patio. We can open that if we need to. We have other chairs if we need to bring in chairs. While they're setting up, I'll just tell you why we put international in our name. Because Jeffrey Wigan is one of our advisors. He couldn't come to the actual meeting. But, you know, he helped us to write our mission statement, our vision statement. I met him at the meeting last year. And he's a lot funnier than he is in the movie The Insider, I'll tell you that. He's always calling me now and playing tricks on me, pretending to have some kind of an affair with my girlfriend, and then he calls and says he's calling from Tatooine. So I have to be on my toes when he calls. But he says, why is it that we're trying to picture whistleblowers as one kind of person or another? This is a problem around the world. It's a problem in the Muslim world. It's a problem in Asia. It's a problem everywhere. And we need to protect the truth. And that knows no boundaries. And our friend Tom Devine is, interrupt me when you guys are ready. I'm just filling the time. All right. You know, I can do a little puppet show with the shadows, things like that. I don't want to waste your time, though.
Okay, why don't we
how are you doing?
Okay, we're all set.
So here we have our distinguished panel to talk about international whistleblowing.
Okay, thanks. I am B. Edwards, and I manage the international program at the Government Accountability Project. And we are here today to talk about whistleblowers at international financial institutions. And we are scheduled on this day where the focus of the week, or the focus of the day today is judicial accountability. And this panel is scheduled here because of the issue of judicial accountability and the international financial institutions, because on the spectrum of accountability in the courts, the international financial institutions are way over on the lack of accountability end. And the reason for that is when they were established, they were endowed by member countries with sovereign immunities, or immunity from prosecution, which over the years in the courts where the IFIs operate has been interpreted to mean pretty much absolute immunity. And that has become over the years a problem for people working for these institutions, for taxpayers in donor countries who fund them, and taxpayers in borrowing countries who must repay the loans and the loans that are made to their governments. So on the panel today, I wanted to get started as quickly as we can since we are short of time. We're going to start with Mishka Zaman. She is the Asia Program Manager at the Bank Information Center. The Bank Information Center, as many of you know, is the premier watchdog organization here in Washington focused on the banks. And Mishka is just back from the annual meetings of the Asia Development Bank, where the issue of transparency and accountability was a primary focus of the meetings. We also have Dr. Kunal Saha, who served on an investigation team into allegations of corruption and fraud in healthcare projects in India financed by the World Bank. And finally, Doug Hartnett of Lataka and Hartnett, who recently argued successfully against the immunities in district court here in D.C. So we'll start, first of all, with Mishka talking about the context of transparency and accountability at the ADB.
just want to start off by talking a little bit about a report that the Global Accountability Project, the One World Trust issued. It's called the Global Accountability Report. And it rated the Asian Development Bank amongst the top 3 of 30 organizations that it reviewed against a framework which assessed the policies and systems according to 4 dimensions of accountability. And these 4 dimensions were transparency, participation, evaluation, and complaint and response mechanisms. So the ADB ranked very high. It was number 2 actually in the list of 30. Sorry. So analyzing the accountability standards of powerful global actors is a welcome and necessary and also a daunting task. But civil society organizations in countries that borrow from the Asian Development Bank have experienced repeated and consistent gaps in transparency and participatory processes and access to any project level complaint mechanisms. So it raises the question, where is the locus of accountability? And after the One World Trust report was launched back in December, we received a comment from a partner organization in Pakistan which said, who said, "I'm surprised to know that accountability has moved up to the global level, while it has almost totally been extinguished at the national and local levels." But to be fair to the One World Trust, they clearly state that their report measures the accountability capabilities of organizations by assessing the policies and management systems that they have. And they note that to make sure accountability happens in practice, there needs to be constant vigilance that policy commitments are translated into action and accountability principles and values are embedded within the culture of the organization. So at the end of the day, we feel accountability needs to be measured at the point of impact, and which in our experience needs to be the national and local context. And internally driven approaches to accountability miss the external dimension of the ability of holding that organization to account, and inability to impose sanctions for violations, which if sanctions cannot be imposed, then that undercuts the accountability claims of an organization. So internal versus external accountability is something which many groups wrestle with regarding the IFIs, as IFIs are only subject to their own internally defined policies and systems with no real cost for violations of standards. The question can be asked, is that really accountability? And we have found in our own work on strengthening transparency, accountability, social and environmental standards at IFIs, that the adoption of strong policies and management systems is a necessary precondition for accountability, but it is not to be equated with actual accountable practice. So how can the Asian Development Bank be held accountable by external parties? And what are the ADB's accountability reference points? The ADB allows 2 avenues to external parties. One is called the accountability mechanism, and the other is the Office of the Auditor General and its Integrity Division. Underpinning both of the above and all of the ADB's work is the ADB's public communications policy, which was approved in 2005, which enables the release of documents on a routine and request basis. And this policy is a considerable improvement on the ADB's previous disclosure policy, and also improves in certain aspects on other disclosure transparency policies in existence at other IFIs. But let's take a quick look at the ADB's accountability mechanism, which was approved in December 2003. It consists of an ombudsman and a compliance function. It has many features, again, that improve upon similar quasi-independent inspection mechanisms that exist at other IFIs, like the ease of filing a case, greater transparency during the process, more involvement of the claimants during the claim process, and it also has a monitoring function, and it reports to the board of the ADB. That mechanism has processed 12 cases in 4 years to varying degrees of closure, but the mechanism is not well known amongst communities who often face impacts of ADB investments, and it is not advertised at all at the project level. So there is an information gap which exists there. And civil society organizations generally feel that the mechanism has investigative capacity and expertise, but it does not have the enforcement powers required to ensure that the decisions or the advice that it provides to the board actually translates into action on the ground. Then, looking at the ADB Office of the General Auditor, which is the main department dealing with fraud and corruption, I've been looking at their website recently, and they've been putting out more and more information out in terms of publicizing their sanctions list and putting out information about how many firms and how many individuals they declared ineligible to participate in ADB financed activities. But if you look at how the ADB approaches anti-corruption in its day-to-day work in the project processing, we found that the ADB does not really make much of an effort to limit the incidence and impact of corruption in its lending operations. And we came to this conclusion after we did a report back in 2004, which looked at a sample of countries' strategies, project appraisals, and evaluation reports, and we assessed how those took corruption into account. And we found that the ADB almost never complied with the policy requirement to explicitly address corruption issues in its reports, assessments, and evaluations. So this is not very encouraging, and just demonstrates that while there's a strong rhetorical adherence to anti-corruption efforts, it's not really translating into work. And this is also discouraging because there are very few recourse options available to citizens. And I believe someone will look into this immunity question a little more deeply, but let me just say that the ADB believes that its charter provides it with immunity from lawsuits in its member countries. Chapter 8 of the charter states that to enable the bank to effectively fulfill its purpose and carry out the functions entrusted to it, the status, immunities, exemptions, and privileges set forth in the charter shall be accorded to the bank in the territory of each member. And one of our colleagues, Steve Hers, who probably will be on the phone in a bit, argues that as a general proposition, most states limit immunities that they grant to IFIs to what is functionally necessary for the IFIs to effectively discharge their responsibilities. But in practice, IFIs have often insisted that they enjoy absolute or near absolute immunity, and Steve can elaborate on this. So how does the ADB treat whistleblowers? I have two examples. I've been working at BIC for 5 years, and to be honest, it's not very often that one comes across whistleblowers at the Asian Development Bank. I mean, that in itself is a question to be explored. Why not? One is a Canadian consultant. He was terminated in 2002 by the project officer responsible for the project that he was implementing in Cambodia. The project officer, in the consultant's view, the project officer, when he was appointed to that project, and upon learning that the Canadian consultant was the team leader, terminated him because the Canadian consultant had knowledge of that project officer's behavior and dealings in projects that he had managed previously in Bangladesh. And that is the country of origin of the ADB project officer. So there was a sense that the Canadian consultant might divulge either those past misdeeds, or if that project officer wanted to use the project in Cambodia to indulge in corrupt, unethical practices, then that Canadian consultant might prove to be an obstacle. So the Canadian consultant was terminated. He had been an ADB consultant for 25 years, lots of experience, worked on numerous ADB-funded projects, and the consultant feels that he made every reasonable attempt to resolve the problem with the ADB, the problem of his termination, and kept asking, on what basis are you terminating me? Can you provide me with some written evidence? And to this day, he has not been provided any written evidence or written reasons as to why he was terminated. So he is currently suing the ADB project officer, the ADB, and the consultancy firm that he worked for defamation. And he's suing them in the Philippines, where defamation is a criminal offense, and in Canada, because according to the advice of his lawyer, he's been told that Canadian law does not provide protection to an ADB employee, as an employee is not a representative of a state or a government that is a member of the ADB, which is what is protected. And in addition to the court actions, this consultant is preparing a detailed account of the illegal and unethical actions of the ADB over the past 25 years, naming a number of officers and providing documentary proof. So we'll see when that happens. Another example, which B actually is more familiar with, is about a British consultant who also has provided evidence of corruption around 4 technical assistance projects in Afghanistan that this British consultant was involved with. And he submitted his case to the ADB back in December 2005. The allegations were around staff misconduct, including bribery, waste of ADB finance resources, fraudulent misrepresentation in project reports to donors, and there's a long list. Again, in summary, he feels that the ADB never responded adequately. It took him 2 years. It took them 2 years to actually investigate the claims that he was making, and even then, they did not provide all the evidence that they had, which he had provided them, to the independent auditor that they had appointed to investigate those claims. The independent auditor issued their report, get the date right, I believe in September or December, and they summarized that out of the 27 allegations that this consultant made, they found 22 to be true, and with respect to 5 others, we remain uncertain due to a lack of information. So again, the case has been made adequately, but what happens? The ADB decides that their project officer in question, who is managing those 4 TAs in Afghanistan, that person retired. So they're saying investigating him is no longer viable. He's gone now. So we don't bear any responsibility there. The consultant is trying, and I'll pass on this magazine to you on page 2. He's trying everything at his disposal, if anyone wants to look at it. And this is what he did at the annual meeting of the ADB just last week. He's trying anything possible to draw attention to the fact that these projects, which the ADB has wound up, still need to be looked at, because the money that donors put into them is not doing the type of work that was intended, and that people who are meant to benefit are not receiving any of those benefits. And he hasn't been compensated for, he was terminated, and the fact that he lost months and months of employment, that is also still an open question. And now the ADB is trying to characterize him as someone who's just trying to extort money from them. And this is again very direct communication that I had with people in the ADB. So maybe we could elaborate on the details of the case if I've managed to pick something up. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mishka. And I think in the interest of time, we'll just move along to Dr. Saha, who will talk about his experience as a member of an investigation team for the Department of Institutional Integrity at the World Bank.
Thank you, V. Thank you all for coming here and for inviting me here to present what I have seen over the last year or so. I am, in view of the limitation of time, I'm not going to go through much about details of what happened in this course of investigation, which is still ongoing. And if anybody is interested, you can see me after this. I have everything in my computer. Any documents, anything I refer, it is all there. I can give you a copy on a CD. So, and you can also find a lot of information about what I'm going to talk online. Just simple Google search, because this has been in the news quite a bit, both here as well as in India, because it involves India. Now, I am originally a physician from India. I migrated here in the mid-80s, and I have in many parts, like many Indian doctors you may have known, I specialize in HIV/AIDS. Now, I was contacted by the World Bank in, I believe it's March last year, asking me for my expertise for investigation of complaint of HIV kids in India. Now, the thing which involves in this, as you can imagine, is really a human tragedy of the worst kind. Why HIV kids? What they do? They detect HIV. So every one of us who has the experience of blood transfusion, which happens in many cases, like blood transfusion, each blood donated by whoever, a donor, must be tested for HIV. It's a mandated law everywhere in the world. For obvious reason, you don't want to give HIV. Well, HIV is one, hepatitis viruses also must be tested. But apparently there were allegations. So the World Bank came to me saying that they received complaints that Indian, many people getting HIV through blood. And the culprit was bogus kits that's been used in Indian hospitals. So a team, World Bank team, was going. So I was part of that team as a medical consultant. Now I am in Columbus, Ohio. I have been in many universities. Right now I'm in Columbus, Ohio, and this investigation lasted more than a month. So it was not easy for me. But because I'm originally from India and as a doctor, it's a moral duty, and I read this news before that this is happening. I'm also involved in elevating the public awareness about HIV/AIDS, which is in India is ranked #2 right now. In the USA, it's a worldwide problem, as you all know, still a massive problem. So I was willing. I went with World Bank team to India. We were there more than a month. I stayed more than a month too. Visited many hospitals and AIDS centers and blood banks and collected data. So after that trip, what I saw, and with my experience in 20 years with HIV and AIDS research in this country, I had little doubt in my mind. It's a terrible travesty was going on. Many of those kids were bad, and many people probably contacted HIV through blood transfusion, which news reports frequently comes in India. And then again, a simple Google search will show you that. But of course, as you all know probably, the investigation of World Bank is a massive project. It's not just HIV/AIDS. I was only one. There were 2 other Indian doctors there. There are other people in this HIV team, the World Bank team that investigated HIV. But when I returned, I could not, to my conscience, I could not stay just one after seeing what I saw. As a medical doctor, it's my ethical duty to expose if I see patients' lives are being put to danger. Now here's a problem, because before I went there, of course as a consultant, I had to sign an agreement, confidentiality agreement, as you know, so I could not even go to that place. But I wrote to the World Bank president, back then it was, I believe in June, Paul Wolfowitz. So I wrote to him seeking his permission, that you give me permission so that I can go to that place, because this is a human travesty, what I have seen, in my opinion, and I must go. So Paul Wolfowitz, I think he left end of June. I mean, I was waiting. I gave him it was actually, I gave a deadline because I had to otherwise. It's a hard choice. One, whether I break the confidentiality agreement or whether I break my medical ethics and keep mum after saying this. Eventually, I remember Paul Wolfowitz called me the night before he was retiring. Then last day of June, I believe, after midnight, his secretary called. Then I talked with Wolfowitz. He said that, Dr. Saha, I'm really sorry, and this letter came to me somehow very late, and I'm calling you so late now because you have given a deadline end of June. I'm also leaving, so it is not in my hand. But I appreciate what you're trying to do. and I will pass this one on. You just hold off for a few days. This next is coming, and the board, they will meet, and they will get back to you. And that was very nice of him. I did appreciate that. And I said, fine, I waited. I can wait a few days long, which I did. And then eventually I did get that permission from World Bank. They said, well, this is something you feel medical ethics and it involves human lives. So yes, you can. What you feel in your opinion. So I did go to the press in India because this travesty directly involves India. Indirectly, of course, World Bank and here. So I did go there to the press, and then it was a big news there, of course. And no sooner I went to the press, it was an Indian, major newspaper that, well, the World Bank specialist says that bad kids are giving HIV, and yeah, that's what I said. That was in my opinion, that's what I felt. And well, NACO is a huge project. I don't know how many of you have idea. World Bank funded, this was the NSCP2. We are part of the NSCP2. NSCP stands for National AIDS Control Project, Program 2, second one. World Bank, I believe, funded more than 200 millions, but a lot more money is provided by Indian government. So a lot of money involved in this. And so it was a huge news. The Central Indian Government AIDS Control Agency, called NACO, NACO, they lashed out at me right after that. They said, oh, this guy has no credibility, and there's no evidence that we got anything wrong, any patients got this thing, there is nothing to it, blah, 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 blah. Well, there was another incident. So one of the major culprits in this kit fiasco is called Monozyme India Limited. It's a company, they produce HIV testing kits. There was a criminal case filed in 2006 in one of the states, West Bengal. Actually, I am from West Bengal. It was in big news there because eventually the government had to file a criminal case for making these kits. And that was part of the World Bank's, or part of the reason that the World Bank went for this thorough investigation. And in our investigation, what I saw and we saw is monozyme kits were used, even though we did not investigate West Bengal, but even other states used the same kit, and they produced terrible results. And that results, yes, it is true, I did not in my hand have evidence that a person has got HIV. Well, the reason I didn't have the evidence, because we did not look for it. The way you do testing in the blood bank, then if the test comes negative, blood is cleared, it's passed on to a hospital. People going to hospital who require blood, simple thing, appendix surgery, you will be given the blood. Or you had an accident, check into the ER, you need blood, you'll be given the blood. Blood carrying clean sign that the blood is negative for HIV. Now here's the thing, the WHO guidelines maintains in blood bank, it's a single step test. Meaning, one kit is used, and if it found negative for HIV, it is supposedly to be clean and passed on to a hospital. So in any single instance where a blood is tested with a kit like this, which does not detect HIV, one person must get that blood. Now again, you all probably have idea about HIV/AIDS because, in today's world, even if you get HIV/AIDS today by an accident like this, you will hardly realize anything. Most of people who are infected, whether through blood, through unprotected sex, for whatever reason, there's hardly any initial clinical signs or symptoms. You might get slight flu-like symptom, which we all get flu. We don't go and see whether we have HIV or not. So there is nothing until very late when you develop the symptom, the real symptom. That could be 5 years, 10 years, or even longer, even without any treatment. So the point is, if one contaminated blood is being sent to a hospital, somebody gets that blood, he or she would not realize it until many years later. And now I have many cases like this because since this fight started almost 1 year ago. Now, coming back to how I'm here today, so I went to the press, NACO attacked me. I went to the World Bank, I wrote, then Robert Zoellick became the president, we're still the president. I wrote to them that, look, I represented World Bank. You came to me, I did not go to you. I was one of your medical consultants. They are saying I have no credibility. Of course, what they are saying makes no sense because I have all this evidence. If you bring any other person, and any specialist would agree with me on these things. So you have to defend me. Well, they did not. I was not defended. In fact, World Bank spokesperson in India said, well, this is just Dr. Saha's own opinion. We don't support this, and we have not condoned this thing. So this fight is a very nasty fight, and as I said, I can't go through all the details and results and communication, but if you're interested, I'll be more than happy to show you later on. But this fight went on and on and on. World Bank kept on saying, well, yeah, there's something like, maybe there's some data, but, well, it's not clear that there was really bogus kits. It's not clear that there, any patient really got infected because of these bogus kits. Now, this was it continued till October, November, and I came to World Bank. I presented my data. I tried to convince them that although they were not doctors, well, there was one doctor who is still, I guess, the head of public health, Dr. Keith Customans of World Bank. Before him and Mr. Richards that time, I presented the basic data. Now, what I had, very limited amount of data. I did not have that entire, like, statistically significant data, true, but what I had, what we, during our visit, found out, it's a very extremely high number of false negative testing, which is the most dangerous thing because the false negative means there are two things. A bad kit can give a false positive or false negative. And you understand, false negative means the blood has HIV, you fail to detect. False positive means the blood doesn't have HIV, you detect HIV. So danger in false positive, well, there is really no danger. Whenever you find a positive with HIV, the blood is immediately discarded. So, yes, it's bad because you waste a lot of blood, precious blood, and there could be a myth, that the person might falsely be thinking he has HIV when he does not. So that's bad. I mean, false positive is bad. A false negative carries the real danger simply because that blood is positive with HIV, the kit fails to detect it, and it's every possible chance that contaminated blood will be given to somebody in the hospital. So, this fight went on for like months. The bottom line is, they tried to hush it up. And look, I told World Bank many times, I told NACO many times, I have nothing in this. I'm doing only for the sake of humanity, and this happened to be my native country, where HIV/AIDS is a massive problem today. Millions of people are already infected. So, but again, the fight was, at that stage, it seems like the fight was not to protect the people, not to protect the people who already got HIV, not to punish this manufacturer, these corrupt, unscrupulous manufacturers of this HIV kit, but it appeared that the fight was against me, to shut me down, basically. On 14th December, Dr. Keith Customans went to New Delhi, India, in this relation. He said, well, we're talking to NACO and this thing. And he returned, I believe, on 13th or 14th, around that time. And then the government of India, in their website, published a press release. And I have a copy in my computer if you want to see on 14th December. It starts with Dr. Kunal Saha. Here is the government. It says Dr. Kunal Saha has been claiming that we have bad kids, blah, 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 blah. It is all bogus. Bogus for more than one reason. We have a doctor from CDC, Dr. Robert Martin. He said whatever Kunal Saha said is all bogus, all rubbish. That's not true. So they attacked this brazenly, put a press release against me on 14th of December last year. Irony, in January, eventually, I kept on in my file. I say, well, when all the medical experts, 3 of them, including myself, and the other World Bank team, we prepared a final report on this while in India. And we all agreed that report was never published. I said, why you don't publish that? That's not my opinion. That's a consensus opinion. Why you don't publish this? This was one of my major contention all along. But they did not. They said, well, we are doing this. It's a long process. It's not just a simple thing. But eventually, they did publish this DIR report, the World Bank report. It's not DIR report. It's available online. And there, basically, whatever I said, much of it, almost all, sometimes word by word, it was there. Everything was correct and truthfully presented there. Now, I did not prepare for this talk, but I just quoted a few of the fraud and corruption directly taken from DIR report. And, on page 380, the DIR found indicators of fraud and corruption in the vast majority of contracts it reviewed. Page 381, the DIR reviewed 217 contracts valued at US $2.7 million and found that 178 of them, 82%, had one or more indicators of fraud and corruption, total value of $2.4 million. Page 335, SACS official demanded and received bribes from NGOs awarded contracts. Page 386, in Nashik, that's one of the Indian cities, DIR found identical formatting calculation, spelling errors, abbreviation in 2 or more quotations on 18 out of 25 contracts reviewed. Page 349, a number of test kits procured under NSEP2 performed poorly by yielding invalid results and or unusually high false positive, false negatives or otherwise discordant results. At blood banks which screens and stores blood for transfusions, all negative results carry the serious risk of transfusion-transmitted infection, and so on. I have the whole list. I'm not going to go over this thing. So this was in January. So the DIR report basically supported what I had been telling, and World Bank all along fought against me. No, we didn't see any fraud and corruption, so we cannot say that. But they did say, well, there is a little story. They were forced apparently to publish this DIR report. That's what I hear. I don't know the details of that part of the story. And once this was a huge news, international news, when DIR report published on HIV/AIDS in India, Indian government immediately came, oh, we will give exemplary punishment, we will do investigation and we will punish these people, whoever it is. And I immediately wrote to the Ministry of Health, who last month only just tried to attack me with the press release. But I said, look, I am doing it only for the sake of my native country. All these innocent people are dying. They are going to die there if they get this. I am willing, because I've been involved with this investigation from the beginning. Now you said you're going to do investigation and punish the guilty people, and I will provide my service free. You don't have to pay me a dime, but because I know, I think I can help you. Well, I never heard from them, and I never heard from them even now. In the meantime, World Bank contacted a few other experts. Well, Dr. Martin is one. I contacted Dr. Martin in CDC. Simple question that if you saw, I don't know what he saw. I don't know whether he gave an opinion like this at all. And nobody contacted me. The first thing to me, it seemed if he was another expert, he would have contacted me and say, okay, let's talk it over and why I think it is bad, why you think it's good. But he never responded to me. Eventually, I had to write to the director, CDC director. I said, look, this has happened. It has defamed me. The Indian government used your name, CDC's name, saying this thing. Apparently, Dr. Martin gave an opinion. Eventually, I got a letter back just 2 months or 3 months ago from the Assistant Surgeon General saying that, oh, Dr. Saha, I'm clarifying. No, Dr. Martin just was there and didn't see much. And whatever he saw, he could not prove or disprove anything. He said he cannot say anything either way. This is the letter I have from the CDC eventually. Then World Bank told me that they contacted another Australian HIV expert. Now I wrote, in the meantime, I wrote to World Bank that there are so many excellent HIV/AIDS experts in this country. you produce the same thing to them. You get their opinion. NIH has, CDC has, and so many good universities, and I know many of them. But they apparently went to an Australian expert, Elizabeth Dax, and then they came up with the Washington Post report early this year that, well, Dr. Dax said, well, what she saw is probably a technician's error. Technician's error. Now, the problem with monozyme kit, the allegation, as I said, I can't go much detail in the short time. The 5 different hospitals alleged or lodged complaining in the same kit, monozyme, similar time frame. And she said it's technician's error. Of course, then 5 different hospitals simultaneously have to have bad technicians and over this long period of time in order to build this story. Now, I have written to Elizabeth Dax, well, I've written to World Bank with specific questions for Dr. Dax. And I'm still waiting to hear from Dr. Dax more than a month ago. I've also written to CDC. I said, look, fine, it's not, but they defamed me, tried to defame me using your name. Yeah, you didn't do it directly, so you have a responsibility. My attorney sent a letter to CDC director recently saying that you have to tell us directly, categorically, that what Indian government did is, CDC has no role. CDC never said what Dr. Saha said was wrong or right, because here is your letter. He said Dr. Martin could not say either way. I'm still waiting to hear from CDC. Anyway, I'll stop here. And as I said, feel free to see me if you have specific questions. Thank you.
We'll move on to Doug